Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan.
I'm Jessica Faust.
And today we have with us literary assistant Umaima Saleem. So I'm going to pass the mic off to Jessica because today we're talking about how Umaima and I both turned our internships into a job.
Yeah, so we thought this would be a really fun topic, and mostly we really like talking about ourselves. Yeah. So I suggested that both James and Umaima started at BookEnds as interns, and they aren't the first BookEnds agents who started here as interns. It's a little bit of a trend. I think that for any of us in the business world, but as well as any intern, the ideal dream is that the internship moves forward into a job. And for both James and Umaima, that is exactly what happened. So I wanted to bring them on to talk a little bit about how they made that happen, because really it was their work that sort of pushed me to bring them on to the next level. The first thing I'm curious to ask you guys is that I feel like literary agencies and literary agents are the secret of the publishing world. That when you're in publishing, and even an author who's done the research to get published, you know exactly what a literary agent is. But when you're outside of publishing, you have no idea what that is or that they even exist. So I'm curious how you found out about literary agents and what brought you to this side of the business. Umaima, do you want to start since you were most recently doing that?
Sure. So how I discovered what a literary agent actually was actually through the BookEnds YouTube channel. When Jessica was a blonde. Yeah, actually Jessica was a blonde back then, so so
it was a rough period.
I had found a video that you had done exactly explaining what is a literary agent, and that's how I discovered what it exactly was, because usually when you think of books, you just think of the big five or publishing houses. That's it. You don't recall that there's something called a literary agent, and you don't realize how important a literary agent actually is when it comes to getting published. So once I discovered that, I did some more research, and that's how I understood what it was.
That's awesome. Well, it's awesome that you found us that way.
It was meant to be.
Mine was a lot slower.
Well, we didn't have a YouTube channel then.
No, it wasn't the YouTube channel. My publishing awakening in general was really slow. So I was always a reader, and then I started to notice all the little logos on the side of books and realized, well, that's a publisher. And then I started reading the acknowledgments and all the authors thanking their agents. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then finally it just clicked in my head, wait, that's someone who works in publishing. So then after that, I just did all the necessary research. Of course, I didn't have such an easy video to just watch, so I had to Google and read stuff. But yeah, it's pretty much the same. It's not something that's well known. I think agents are sort of unless you're in publishing, they're like unsung, right? So that's everybody knows an editor.
So can the two of you talk about some of the resources that you went to find internships and to figure out where to send your resumes? I know from yesterday's conversation that James doesn't remember how he found BookEnds, but Umaima does. Well, it was YouTube. But but what are some of the other resources for people looking for internships or who want to go into publishing in general, would you recommend?
So one that I would recommend, which has much more in it, is bookjobs.com. That's how I found a lot of like internships. A lot of big publishing houses, even small publishing houses, also post over there, and it's actually a really good source because even if there's no like postings, you have every agency, every publishing house, everything there, so you can actually click, see, and check for yourself. And I would really recommend that one. Of course, you can also go to, if you know specific literary agencies, you know them by name, go onto their website, email somebody, or see if they have, a special tab that says internships. And also big publishing houses, they have something like that. So LinkedIn, all of the, usual resources as well. That's how I would go about it.
Yeah, I think just sort of making that list of the places you'd want to work at and going to their website. Like you said, most of the big publishing houses have work with us pages that you can find, and they list every opening that they possibly have in the company. But also following industry professionals. A lot of us tweet about when we're looking for an intern, come work with us, something like that. So if you're following people in the industry, you're following, there are places like POC and Pub that boost all of those calls for interns and open positions. So definitely immersing yourself in the community, and a lot of that sometimes will cross your timeline.
And I would also add, from the hiring side and from my own experience of job hunting literally a lifetime or two ago, just send out resumes. I mean, if you are interested in an agency or a publishing house, but you can't find information about an internship, or they haven't posted to a job board, don't let that stop you. You know, many of my hires at BookEnds came as a complete surprise to me, that I wasn't necessarily looking to hire, that I didn't necessarily think I had a position open, but I got the right resume at the right time and thought, wow, this is interesting. Let me look into this.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's actually how Umaima started at BookEnds. We had, I think it shows initiative, right? So we had closed our internship program for a short period of time, and Umaima applied before that. And we went with someone else, I think it was, and then Umaima applied again. I'm like, well, we're not open. And she followed up, and I was like, you know what? This, like, on paper, Umaima's great. So let's get on the phone call. And it just went well after that. So it shows initiative, and it also, I think you keep letting them know that you are interested, and that level of interest resonates with the hirer.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to tell somebody else that they need you.
Yes,
sometimes
agreed.
They don't see it. And I also want to add that one of the positive side effects of this time of COVID is that publishers and agencies who hadn't previously opened to remote internships are now doing that, which is a great opportunity for all of those who thought they had to live in New York City or near New York City to work in publishing or to work a publishing internship. So this is a great time for anybody who's interested in a career in publishing.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I guess the next question is, what can interns, and granted, it's different from agency to agency. I mean, we've had a lot of interns who've done a lot of different internships. And so I know from stories they tell me that the expectations or the tasks they do at different agencies or publishers can be very different from one to the next. But I think it would be great for people to hear what it was like for you guys at BookEnds. And I'm kind of curious too, even though I was there. It's kind of interesting to hear your perspectives of what kind of tasks and jobs you did as an intern, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, so I think I do want to say too that it depends on when you intern with the company too. So I interned 5 years ago, and I think it was a completely different internship experience for Umaima than it was for me. So when I was interning, it was a lot of, I did a ton of reading, and that was always great. I did a lot of contract work, and of course all of the administrative stuff like filing and doing the mail.
There's a lot of filing.
There's a ton of filing, and actually I now love filing. Filing as a publishing professional, like when you're actually in the industry and then you got a million other things to do, I'm like, I'm gonna go file, because that's about 25 minutes of pure peace and singing the alphabet song. So I'm gonna go there. So that was what my internship experience looked like, but I think it was broad. We were a smaller company then too, and I got to really individually work with each and every one of the agents at BookEnds and work on different genres and different projects, but do that in a really close setting, I think.
So yes, you had to do filing. Yeah, a lot of filing. I mean, my quads were burning all the time. Workout, I guess. But filing, definitely, that was one that, you're the intern. You have to start from the bottom and work your way to the top. And mailing, all of that stuff, scanning, printing, organizing. I also, once I kind of got comfortable with that, then I kind of went into, okay, Now we're going to let you try query manager. Then we're going to let you do some manuscript reading. So like any manuscripts that were sent, James or Jessica or even other agents would ask me if I was interested, and I would read and write a reader's report, which is basically telling them your thoughts about the manuscript, which it's just a manuscript. It's not even a book. So that was pretty exciting because it's like you're seeing this thing from like the bottom and hopefully it'll go to the top. And yeah, that was one thing I did. Organizing the shelves was actually one of my favorite ones. I don't know why. I always liked like pulling out the books and just putting them in, and maybe it's my OCD, just organizing. So that was definitely one. Gosh, there were so many. And for me, my internship was kind of different, if I can say. It was very different because I actually first started off at the office, and then 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit, and we went completely remote. So that was definitely a different. I feel like I was different in that sense because BookEnds, our internships are in office. We expect the intern to be in office to give them that experience, which is, I would say that it was one of the best. I like that I had the in-office experience. But then once it transitioned to being remote, I was doing a lot more of the social media stuff, thinking of ideas, doing contracts, making sure the contracts match, all of that. Yeah, so the usual intern stuff.
Well, going remote was very interesting for me because I was always resistant to remote interns. And let me explain why. It's not because of the filing, because I love to have an intern file, but that wasn't it. My feeling about an internship from my perspective is it was very important to me that it be a learning experience, that an intern's job wasn't just to read submissions and do readers' reports, because while I've always believed that those are part of the learning experience, there's so much more to this job that I wanted our interns to take away. And I really struggled, and James knows this because we have discussed this for years, and both of us have struggled with a way to provide what we wanted to provide through an internship remotely. So I'd be curious for somebody who really showed us that it maybe can be done remotely. But I also wonder what that experience would have been like for you if you hadn't had the time in the office, getting to know us and having that sort of, I feel like there's time in the office where when James and I are just having conversations about stuff and talking stuff out that you may hopefully benefit from and learn from.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely did. And, I learned a lot more about the industry because of our, listening to you guys speak and obviously having my opinions heard and whatnot. So the in-office experience, I think was very important. And, it was sad when we were not allowed in the office. Like that was one of my main concerns because I actually liked being in the office and liked talking to you guys and having that interaction. And, it's also, the publishing world moves really, really quickly. So things happen in like every minute, I would say, and just us talking about it rather than, typing to each other, which
it's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And I know we try to, I know, you guys have been amazing when the internship went remote because you had made sure let's carve out an hour or two a week where we can talk about contracts and submissions and all of that stuff. So that was really important because that is part of the job. And if you don't know that, you're going to be lost when you're actually applying for jobs.
Yeah, and when you were in the office, both of you for your internships, I think it was easier for me if something came up on Slack, let's say from somebody else, a question about a contract, or we had a discussion in the meeting, then after the meeting or from the Slack, we could just have a natural conversation where it was easy for you to turn to me and say, well, what does that mean? Or for me to say, are you following what's going on? Let me explain it further. Right. And I think when you're remote, it's harder for me to think to do that. And I think you have to have a certain personality, which both of you have, to be able to feel confident enough to come forward and say, I have no idea what they're talking about. Can you explain this further to me?
Right. It's also, it's relearning communication styles because everyone has a different communication style online than they do in person. And the way we can talk and just bounce stuff off each other in office, it's a little different when you got pinging in your ear every 2 minutes from a Slack notification. So I think like that was the benefit of an in-person, but setting up those calls for a remote and sort of learning each other that way, especially early on in the beginning before we move to a more like textual relationship, I think that would definitely benefit. But another thing about an internship, especially within an agency, and I'm sure in a house it's a little more regimented, but for an agency, the internship really is about what that agency needs at that moment, I think. So for us, our goal is always to provide what is a fleshed out learning experience for an intern, but it varies. So are we doing a ton of contracts right now? Are we doing a ton of reading? Do we need someone that can work on the shelves and help me file? So I always see the intern as doing sort of the same things that I'm doing. And that's always different. So I think that's one of the best parts about an internship with an agency in publishing, is because you're seeing so many different parts of the process and you're doing them at all different lengths. So.
Definitely. So of all those tasks, of all those jobs, besides filing, what for you were some of the more surprising and interesting, unexpected things that you've learned about publishing or did at the job or whatever it is that you took away from it?
So I think
don't know one yet. You can go first.
I think one of those interesting things was like people don't email you back.
No shade.
I remember the first time I said something, you're like, you sound like you're in the publishing industry. So I got initiated. So that was definitely like frustrating, because it's like, you know, this is a great book, you don't want to publish it? So that was one thing that was interesting. One thing that I remember at the beginning that I found really interesting was that just because you self-pub does not mean you don't need a literary agent. So I think when it comes to, if you're a self-published author, you want, you know, your work to become an audiobook so that other people's it could reach other people. You still could use a literary agent for that. And that was really shocking to me, because I always thought when you're self-pubbed, you are everything. You are your own editor, right, publishing house, agent. So that was one thing that really stood out to me, that, oh, wow, you know, you do, even self-published authors need a agent.
That's probably a very good point that a lot of authors who are listening didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would mirror the the communication barriers that we might have. But I think the most surprising thing, and we all probably know it, but it's not until you're confronted with it that you're like, whoa, how subjective everything actually is. Like, even within the office, hearing the differences between Jessica's opinion and Kim's opinion, or mine and Jessica's opinion. I think that once you get in a publishing setting and realizing that there's 30 different ways to come at any situation or any revision, or different people that might be interested in a book or might not be interested in a book, it kind of opens everything up a bit more.
That's one of the things I love about doing second reads and meetings, because you know everybody. And to me, especially for people who are new to the business, whether you're an intern or a new agent or an assistant, that listening to everybody on your own team talk about the same book gives you an understanding of how subjective it is. But I also, for me, it's always been really helpful, in hearing what other people say helps me see my own blind spots when it comes to publishing. And that's been really helpful to me.
Not only that too, but also get a better sense of how other people might respond, because we can read something, love it, like everyone's going to love this, but then hearing other people speak on it, like, oh, so I might run into an issue here, or I might hear someone say that they don't like this about the book. And it gives me a fuller picture of what I might run up against when submitting. And even when I'm going to start revisions, and I get a better, so I think that's one of the great things about BookEnds, is that we are so collaborative. So we have those sorts of opinions on the regular, whenever we need them, just at our fingertips. But
yeah, definitely. So I know the answer to this, but I'd be curious what you two think was the key to you moving from being an intern to being a regular old employee here at BookEnds.
Well, I'm going to make Umaima go first, because I kind of want to hear her answer. Since it happened most recently, I kind of just curious.
So I think what happened was that when I realized, when I got comfortable and I realized like what we're trying to accomplish, what is the agency's goals, I never looked at when I was at BookEnds as an internship. I actually looked at it as my job. I thought of everybody as my team. I didn't think of them as just, oh, I'm going to be here for a few weeks or months and then bye, never see you again. I actually took it as my job. And I'm also a writer, and I kind of, once I saw what literary agents do, I created this mantra for myself, which was think like a writer, act like an agent. And I took that mantra and I just tried to see what I can do with it. And a lot of it, what I did was I tried to think outside the box. So we're big on social media, and that's what we're trying to help writers. That's what one of our goals is. So sometimes writing is hard. It's very hard. Inspiration and all of that just doesn't sometimes come to you. So I wanted to figure out a way, like, how can we touch more writers? And that's where the BookEnds Writing Prompt of the Week came from. It was, let's take, different sensory, so description, sensory, what else? A picture, and make a prompt out of it so that it could help writers, to help them, develop that muscle, because writing is like a muscle. You have to exercise it for it to get to where it needs to be. So that was one thing I always tried to do, was look at social media, see what other people are doing, see what people are asking, what they want, and bringing it up to Jessica and James, because you guys have so much to do, you can't catch everything. So I think one of it was, hey, let's talk about self-publishing, because people are curious to know, what do agencies and publishing houses look at it. So that was definitely one thing that I felt like helped. It also helped that I asked questions. It was very important to ask questions, because you're only there for a few months, and this is your opportunity to just learn as much as you can. And anything, even if you think it's silly, you ask it, because maybe it's not. Maybe it's something you're gonna learn a lot about. So I definitely asked a lot of questions. And our agents are not just in one place. They're all over the country, and we actually even have someone international up in Canada. So I always made sure to set up time to speak to them, to learn about their publishing experience, because one thing that they might have done could be something that I'm interested in. I mean, I think we just think as publishing as one line, when there's actually so many levels you have to go in through. So like production, accounting, contracts, all of that. So learning more about those by other agents, and many of them were so sweet and gracious and always carved out time to speak to me. So I think that helped, was that I was actually very interested in knowing about it. It wasn't just an internship for me. It was, this is what I want to do with my life, and I tried very hard to make sure that I got as much as I could out of these few months that I was there.
Good luck following that, James.
I know. I was like, okay, I got really nothing to say here. Well, I think what I do want to point out about Umaima too is I didn't hire her at the end, right? That was Jessica's job. But for me, it was when we were coming to the end of that internship, it was like, no, she's leaving. Like, you made yourself such a presence in the office that when you left, you made an absence, I think. And that's for me, I was like, no. And then when you were hired, I was like, yes, finally. But I think for me, I'm very proactive and organized. And I'm always, like you said, asking questions and just kind of putting my nose in things, seeing what I can do and help. And I hope that it created that same sort of absence when I did leave. But that is what I think helped me stay, is that I kept putting myself out there. And I asked Jessica to come back when I finally finished being an intern, and she was like, well, stay on me. And I did. And I think keeping that level of engagement with your internship supervisors is important, and I hope that's sort of what contributed to it, amongst all of the other things that Umaima just said. So
yeah, well, I mean, James did a summer internship. Well, Umaima was scheduled to do a summer internship, and we needed help, and just decided, let's just start the internship now, and started you early. And James had a summer internship, and then you called me the end of the year.
Yeah. I had a very bad college credit mishap, and Jessica helped me.
And he came back for a second internship, which was really a college credit earning internship.
Yes, it was. I did the work. It still counts.
And I think that both of you answered the question perfectly. And Umaima, what you said about seeing this as a job really resonated with me about why you two are still here, is that you made yourself an invaluable member of the team. Both of you did. That you weren't, we've had a lot of interns over 20 years at BookEnds, and a lot of them, I'm sorry to you all, aren't memorable. You know, they came in as interns, they sat at the desk, they read manuscripts, they didn't communicate, they didn't ask questions. Oftentimes they were even resistant, whether it was out of fear or just disinterest in doing some of the jobs that were theirs. The two of you did whatever. You filed, you did the bookshelves, and the more willing you were to do even the small tasks, the more willing we were to give you the bigger tasks and more tasks. And the more questions you asked, the more you spoke up at meetings, the more we got to know you and wanted to do more work with you. But I think what it came down to is you both brought things and ideas and reshaped BookEnds in even the short time you were here, so that when it was time to go, it was hard for us to imagine that we could do it without you. And that's sort of the end of it. And it's, you know, I know that when you're an intern, that it can be incredibly overwhelming. So the fact that you both put yourself out there so willingly was huge. So, you know, that for me.
Record this and show it to my family. And
so I have one last question. That what does your role at BookEnds, and this is going to be completely different for both of you because,
yes,
you know, like James said, you interned 5 years ago, which is crazy.
I know.
How has your role at BookEnds changed, or what does your role at BookEnds now look like compared to what it looked like as an intern? And I'm just going to say one thing quick, that based on what you said about how you guys came in and took it over as a job instead of as an internship, it may not have changed much. So I'm curious to hear what you say.
Well, since I've interned, I am now taking on clients. So that's been the biggest change. But I think when I first interned, BookEnds didn't have as much of a social media presence. Everybody had their own Twitter and maybe an Instagram, and you were running the blog. And I think I sort of came in and I think I filled that gap, and we did.
You did. You don't have to think it. You did.
Okay.
I mean, for people who don't know, James literally came to me one day and said, you know, I would like to get us on Instagram, and I would like to have a BookEnds Twitter account that's a BookEnds Twitter account, not just our individual Twitters. And so that is all you.
Yeah, so I think then I sort of forged that entire path and expanded the agency in that. So that's how I would say my role has changed. Otherwise, I'm still doing all of those other very fun things like filing and emails and mail and all of that. But sort of expanding my role out and bringing on more and helping BookEnds grow in that fashion. And of course, clients, and doing the projects that I love and representing authors that I think are incredibly talented, and all of the things that BookEnds agents were doing, I am now doing. So that's been exciting to sort of climb up with.
So I've actually only started working. It hasn't even been a month yet. But you know, a lot has happened in this month that's changed. So the last week of my internship, we had started using this new software or database called Airtable.
And I almost had to hire you because of this.
Yeah, we had transitioned to Airtable, so it was definitely doing a lot more of that. You know, getting everything possible in there and organizing it so that, you know, it was easier for all of us to work together. And definitely a lot of it, you know, I'm the literary assistant, so I help out Jessica a lot with, you know, Airtable. It's also scheduling her calls, you know, because everybody's in different time zones. We have to make sure that it works. So scheduling her calls with either, you know, clients or other agents. One other thing is now that I actually interact more with authors, I feel like. Before I didn't, but talking to them, seeing if they got what they needed, that's a lot. There's a lot more interaction with the writers and other industry professionals than there was in the beginning or when I had my internship. So that was definitely one thing that's really stood out. And now I actually am learning more about foreign rights, which is what Jessica Alvarez does. So I'm learning a little bit more about that, what exactly it is, and I'm still learning it, so I don't know anything that much. But definitely, it's getting more and more into it. I haven't really been doing as many reader reports, but I'm always open to reading. I love reading someone's manuscript and seeing what they're trying to, what their story is. So that's definitely one I hope to continue doing. But like I said, we just started it, so it's like already you have this wave of stuff you have to learn, but eventually it'll, I feel like, simmer down.
Yeah.
It'll become second nature.
Yeah. Excellent.
And either of you have, this was a great talk. This was fun for me. And this is being filmed when we're all still working from home, obviously. But yesterday, James and Umaima both came into the office, and I think the first couple hours you guys were here was just catching up on 5 months of conversation. Yeah. So I miss having you guys here.
James literally thought he was going to be there for an hour. 6 hours later.
Silly James.
Yes. Well, I, for one, can't wait to come back. So do these videos in person once more.
So do either of you have any sort of one-hit tip you would say to anybody who wants to turn their internship into a job?
Yes. And I think we sort of said it over and over again, but proactivity, I don't know exactly what the word is, but just putting yourself in there and making yourself known and valuable is I think the be all end all about being an intern, especially being an intern in an industry you want a career in.
I think my tip is just, have the courage to ask. So when I had applied to be an intern at BookEnds, I was actually a few years out of college. I'm in my mid-20s, and one of my biggest worry was that, well, I want to get into this industry, and it's not as easy as, oh, I'm just going to go on LinkedIn to apply to a job as an editor assistant and I'm going to get it. It was a lot tougher than I thought it would be, and I kind of had to go back a little, which is to be an intern. And I got worried that, oh my gosh, here I am, 25, 26 years old, and will these agencies take me? And I knew from the beginning that I wanted to be at BookEnds, and I just sent that email at midnight, and literally 8 hours later, James emails me and says, no, that's fine. We will send us your cover letter and your resume. So, don't be afraid. Don't let stuff like that hold you back. Definitely ask and make connections. The worst thing that's going to happen is someone's going to say no. And doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you and that you should just give up. It just means, find a different way to go about it. So definitely have the courage to just apply.
And I would say both of you are brilliant question askers, like fearless question askers, and makes a huge difference because it shows a level of curiosity and desire that makes all the difference. And it also forces me to talk to you all the time. So of course, then you're going to worm your way in.
I bet you regret that now, don't you?
No, not at all. Well, I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. We want you to see our next videos that we're cooking up because Umaima has definitely helped us come up with some great new ideas. So
we got some fun ones. I'm excited.
Yeah. So like, subscribe.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.